Introduction. Back by popular demand, this is the long-awaited continuation of our journey into forbidden inventions. In the previous parts, we uncovered technologies that challenge science itself. Tonight, we go even deeper into devices so mysterious and powerful, they were erased from history. The ghost phone of Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is remembered as one of the most prolific inventors of the modern era. His name is tied to the light bulb, the phonograph, and countless other innovations that reshaped daily life. But among his many pursuits, there exists a lesser-known project that strayed far beyond the boundaries of accepted science. It is a story that lives in fragments of interviews, scattered notes, and rumors that refuse to die. The attempt to build what came to be known as the ghost phone. This invention was not like Edison's more practical machines. It was not intended for lighting homes, playing music, or improving industry. Instead, it was designed for something far more mysterious. Edison hinted that he believed communication with those who had passed on might one day be possible, not through mystical seances or spiritual rituals, but through the disciplined application of technology. In the early decades of the 20th century, at a time when spiritualism was at its peak, he entertained the idea of constructing a device capable of bridging the boundary between the living and the dead. The origin of this idea lies in Edison's own fascination with unseen energies. He lived in an age when electricity itself still felt like a hidden force, only recently harnessed for human use. Edison spoke of particles, vibrations, and signals that traveled through space unseen, carrying voices, light, and power. To him, the idea that some essence of human life might continue as a form of energy after death was not entirely out of reach. If the human mind was tied to subtle electrical or vibrational processes, then perhaps, he reasoned, a sufficiently sensitive device might be able to detect it. Edison himself never presented detailed schematics for the ghost phone, but he mentioned the concept in several interviews and conversations near the end of his life. In one exchange, he described the project as a kind of advanced phonographic system, designed not to capture ordinary sound, but to amplify the faintest traces of signals that could originate from beyond. He imagined an instrument that would record and magnify these signals with a precision that human senses could never achieve on their own. The public reception of these remarks was mixed. To some, it was another example of Edison's bold imagination, willing to test even the most unconventional ideas. To others, it was a sign of eccentricity in his later years, perhaps even a lapse into speculation unbecoming of a man so firmly associated with practical invention. Yet, the notion persisted, fueled by the cultural climate of the time. The First World War had left millions grieving, and interest in contacting lost loved ones was widespread. Spiritualist mediums claimed they could achieve what Edison suggested, but Edison himself seemed to reject the unscientific methods of seances and preferred the possibility of a technological approach. Over time, references to the ghost phone became increasingly rare. Unlike Edison's famous inventions, which were carefully documented, patented, and manufactured, this device remained elusive. No prototypes were ever presented to the public, no surviving blueprints have been confirmed, and no museum holds a fragment of the machine. All that remains are scattered reports and the haunting idea that one of the greatest inventors of history seriously considered building a machine to listen to voices from another world. Some researchers later speculated that Edison may have exaggerated his involvement, perhaps using the concept to provoke discussion rather than as a genuine engineering project. Others maintain that the idea was real but abandoned once it became clear that reliable results could not be achieved. The ambiguity surrounding the ghost phone has made it one of the most enduring mysteries of Edison's career. Today, the story of the ghost phone survives as part of the larger tradition of forbidden inventions, ideas that blur the line between science and the unknown. It reminds us that even the most practical minds are sometimes drawn toward mysteries that resist explanation. Whether Edison truly pursued this invention or simply entertained the thought, the ghost phone stands as a symbol of the unrecorded paths of science, the experiments that vanish before they can be proven, and the inventions that dissolve into rumor, leaving only a shadow behind. The cold fusion cell of Pons and Fleischmann. In March of 1989, two chemists from the University of Utah, Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons, stood before the world with an announcement that promised to change human civilization forever. They claimed to have achieved what scientists had long considered impossible: nuclear fusion at room temperature. If their words were true, the implications were staggering. Fusion was the same process that powered the sun, a reaction of immense energy released by combining atomic nuclei. In laboratories and research facilities, fusion required extreme heat and pressure, conditions that could only be replicated in giant reactors or experimental machines consuming massive amounts of energy. To suggest that such a reaction could be achieved in a glass jar, on an ordinary laboratory table, seemed almost unbelievable. The two scientists described their apparatus as deceptively simple. It was, in essence, an electrochemical cell. At its core stood a rod of palladium submerged in heavy water, or deuterium oxide. By running an electric current through the system, they claimed, deuterium atoms could be absorbed into the palladium lattice. There, under the right conditions, the atoms would be forced close enough together to overcome their natural repulsion, initiating nuclear fusion. Unlike traditional reactors, this reaction would require no extreme heat, no towering infrastructure, and no massive budgets. Instead, it was a tabletop miracle: nuclear energy in a beaker. What made the announcement so electrifying was the promise it carried. If the claim held true, it would mean a virtually limitless, clean, and safe source of power. Fossil fuels, with all their environmental consequences, could be replaced. The dangers of nuclear fission reactors, meltdowns, radioactive waste, and proliferation risks would fade into irrelevance. Cold fusion, if real, would provide the world with an energy revolution unlike anything before. The excitement was immediate, and headlines declared the dawn of a new era. But the scientific world is cautious, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Laboratories across the globe rushed to replicate the experiment. Teams in Europe, Asia, and North America assembled their own versions of the electrochemical cell, eager to confirm or disprove what Pons and Fleischmann had announced. For a brief moment, there was an atmosphere of anticipation, as if humanity was standing on the edge of a discovery that would redefine history. The results, however, soon began to fracture the dream. While some researchers reported signs of excess heat or unusual measurements, most were unable to replicate the findings. The majority of experiments yielded no evidence of nuclear fusion at all. Critics pointed out flaws in the methodology: that the supposed heat produced could have been miscalculated, that the detection of fusion byproducts such as neutrons and tritium was inconsistent, and that the entire phenomenon might be an illusion born from experimental error. Within months, the excitement turned to skepticism. The U.S. Department of Energy organized panels to evaluate the claims, and their conclusions were harsh. They found the evidence lacking, the theory incomplete, and the results unreliable. Funding, which had initially flowed toward cold fusion research, began to evaporate. By the early 1990s, the scientific establishment had largely dismissed cold fusion as a failed idea. Pons and Fleischmann, once celebrated as visionaries, found themselves isolated and criticized. They eventually left the United States, continuing their work quietly in Europe, but their reputations never recovered. And yet, the story did not end there. Even as mainstream science rejected cold fusion, a small but dedicated group of researchers continued to explore the phenomenon. They pointed out that in some cases excess heat had indeed been measured, and that anomalies in nuclear byproducts could not always be explained away. Over the years, reports of unexplained energy bursts and unusual reactions continued to surface, though never with the consistency required for scientific acceptance. For many, cold fusion became a symbol of forbidden science, a discovery announced too soon, punished too severely, and buried before it could be fully understood. The cold fusion cell of Pons and Fleischmann lingers in history as both a cautionary tale and a tantalizing mystery. It shows the danger of science conducted in the spotlight, where media and public expectation outpace the slow, rigorous work of verification. But it also raises the possibility that an idea dismissed as impossible might still hold hidden truths, waiting for conditions, technology, or understanding to change. For now, the invention remains erased from the mainstream, remembered as a moment when the world glimpsed a future of limitless energy, only to have it vanish almost as quickly as it appeared. Like many forbidden inventions, it leaves behind no definitive answers, only echoes of what might have been. A beaker of heavy water, a rod of palladium, a burst of unexpected heat, and a dream of power so clean and abundant that it could have transformed everything. Whether it was a mistake, a fraud, or a discovery lost before its time, the cold fusion cell stands as one of the most enigmatic chapters in the modern history of science. The Wimshurst Electrostatic Generator Upgrade. In the late 19th century, as electricity was being explored and harnessed in new ways, a fascinating machine captured the attention of inventors and experimenters. It was called the Wimshurst Electrostatic Generator, a device that produced high voltages by turning counter-rotating disks fitted with metal sectors. With its whirring wheels and dramatic sparks leaping through the air, it seemed like both a scientific tool and a glimpse into the hidden forces of nature. The original version of the generator, created by James Wimshurst in the 1880s, was already impressive. It could accumulate significant charges of static electricity, allowing researchers to conduct experiments in physics, medicine, and early electrical engineering. In an era when electricity still carried an aura of mystery, the sight of a Wimshurst machine discharging blue arcs of energy was almost magical. But as with many inventions, the basic design invited curiosity and modification. It was not long before rumors began to circulate about enhanced versions of the machine, upgraded models that produced far more energy than conventional science could account for. The idea of an upgraded Wimshurst generator was tied to the belief that hidden properties of electricity had not yet been fully uncovered. Some inventors claimed that by adjusting the size of the disks, the arrangement of the metal sectors, or the dielectric materials used in the machine, it was possible to achieve extraordinary results. Accounts describe devices that seemed to generate excess energy, producing a continuous output far beyond the simple electrostatic effects that textbooks could explain. One of the most persistent claims came from experimenters who suggested that certain upgraded versions of the Wimshurst generator could tap into a deeper layer of natural forces, sometimes described as etheric or radiant energy. They argued that what appeared to be a static machine was actually interacting with a fundamental medium of the universe, converting it into usable power. According to these accounts, the device could operate without the usual limitations of electrostatics, producing energy that was steady, abundant, and unexplained. Reports of such machines were fragmentary and often anecdotal. Some came from private inventors who insisted they had achieved results that conventional scientists refused to acknowledge. Others were tied to demonstrations in small circles, where audiences witnessed machines running lights or motors seemingly without an external source of energy. Unlike the dramatic sparks of an ordinary Wimshurst generator, these upgraded devices were said to operate smoothly, as if channeling an unseen current that never diminished. As with many inventions on the border of accepted science, documentation was scarce. No patents were successfully filed that captured the essence of these enhancements. Mainstream scientists dismissed the claims as exaggerations, mismeasurements, or misunderstandings of how electrostatic machines worked. Yet the idea of the upgraded generator refused to disappear. In the world of fringe experimentation, the Wimshurst device became a symbol of hidden possibilities, a reminder that even the simplest of machines might conceal secrets when reimagined. The historical record leaves open questions about what truly happened with these alleged upgrades. It is certain that many enthusiasts built and modified Wimshurst generators, each hoping to push the boundaries of voltage, current, and efficiency. Some likely convinced themselves they had achieved breakthroughs, when in fact they had encountered ordinary variations in measurement. But the persistence of the rumors suggests that at least a few designs may have behaved in unexpected ways, enough to inspire speculation about forbidden science. By the early 20th century, interest in electrostatic generators began to fade. More practical technologies, such as transformers and modern alternators, replaced them. The world turned to alternating current systems, pioneered by Nikola Tesla and others, and the old spark machines were relegated to classrooms and laboratories as teaching tools. Yet in the background, whispers of the upgraded Wimshurst generator continued to circulate among those who believed that a simple 19th century device might hold the key to untapped energy. Today, the story survives as one of the many forgotten chapters in the history of invention. The upgraded Wimshurst generator stands as a symbol of what might have been. An elegant machine of glass, metal, and motion, spinning silently while drawing power from sources we still do not fully understand. Whether it was ever more than a rumor, It now belongs to the realm of forbidden inventions, remembered not for what it proved, but for what it suggested. In the meditative stillness of history, one can imagine the soft hum of the discs turning, the faint glow of sparks in a darkened room, and the possibility that something extraordinary was once glimpsed in the rhythm of a machine too simple to be forgotten and too strange to be fully explained. The perpetual light of Dendera, Egyptian light bulb. In the ancient temple complex of Dendera, on the west bank of the Nile in Egypt, lies a chamber carved with images that have fascinated historians, archaeologists, and alternative researchers for decades. Among the many reliefs that decorate its walls, there is one particular depiction that has inspired some of the most unusual theories ever attached to the civilization of the pharaohs. The image shows a large, elongated shape resembling a bulb, with what appears to be a filament inside and a cable-like structure leading to a base. Surrounding it are figures of priests and deities, as if presenting or operating this enigmatic object. Mainstream Egyptology interprets the carving in symbolic terms. Scholars say that the so-called bulb is actually a representation of the mythological lotus flower, out of which the serpent of creation emerges. In this view, the scene is a spiritual illustration of Egyptian cosmology, not a technological artifact. But to others, the resemblance is too striking to dismiss. To their eyes, it looks like a modern electric lamp, a device that should have been unthinkable in a world more than 2,000 years old. The idea of the Dendera light bulb first entered popular imagination in the 20th century, when photographs of the carvings began circulating among researchers of alternative history. To them, the carving did not look like mythological symbolism at all. It looked like a glass enclosure, a filament, and even a supporting base similar to what could be seen in early electrical lamps of the 19th century. The surrounding figures were interpreted as operators, presenting the device as if it were an object of power and reverence. The possibility that the ancient Egyptians might have possessed a source of light has long fascinated scholars. How, after all, did workers illuminate the deep corridors of tombs and temples without leaving evidence of soot from torches or oil lamps? Some explanations point to polished copper mirrors reflecting sunlight into dark spaces, but the logistics of such arrangements remain uncertain. For those who favor the hypothesis of lost technology, the Dendera carvings seem to provide an answer, that the Egyptians may have used some form of electrical lighting long before such inventions were rediscovered in the modern age. Accounts even exist of experimental attempts to recreate the so-called bulb. By constructing a sealed glass container with an electrode inside, filling it with inert gas, and applying high voltage, researchers were able to produce a glow similar in appearance to what is carved on the wall. These demonstrations, though not proof of ancient technology, only fueled the fascination, showing that the shape in the reliefs could indeed be interpreted as a form of lamp. Despite these intriguing possibilities, no physical artifacts resembling such devices have ever been found. Archaeological digs have uncovered countless examples of oil lamps, torches, and other conventional lighting tools, but never a glass bulb, a filament, or electrical conductors that would confirm the theory. For mainstream scholars, this absence of evidence is decisive. They hold that the Dendera image is purely symbolic, a work of art designed to illustrate religious belief, not an engineering diagram. Yet the mystery remains difficult to dismiss. The precision of the carving, the unusual shape, and the surrounding context have ensured that the light bulb theory endures in discussions of forbidden inventions. It embodies the idea that advanced knowledge may once have been discovered, then lost, erased by time, and later reinterpreted as myth. Whether or not the Egyptians truly had access to such technology, the Dendera carving reminds us of how easily the line between history and imagination can blur. The story of the perpetual light of Dendera endures not only because of the relief itself, but because of what it represents. It captures the dream of forgotten knowledge, the possibility that entire chapters of human understanding lie hidden beneath layers of stone and symbol. To some, it is a warning that history may not always be as complete as we assume. To others, it is an inspiration to look more closely, to question, and to imagine what may have been possible in civilizations whose mysteries we have not fully unlocked. In the stillness of the temple, deep within its carved chambers, the Dendera light remains silent. Whether it is a flower of creation or a lamp of forgotten science, its meaning continues to shine in the imagination, a perpetual glow from the past that refuses to fade. The Kohler magnetic current apparatus. In the years surrounding the Second World War, Germany became the center of many unusual experiments in physics and engineering. Amid the well-documented advances in rocketry and electronics, there were also rumors of stranger projects, ideas that seemed to belong more to speculation than to conventional science. One of the most enduring of these is the story of the Kohler magnetic current apparatus, a device said to produce energy from magnets in a way that defied accepted principles. The inventor was Hans Kohler, a German engineer whose name would likely have been forgotten had it not become attached to this mysterious machine. According to reports, Kohler constructed a generator that could operate without fuel, relying instead on the interaction of magnetic fields. The apparatus allegedly produced a steady current, sufficient to power electrical equipment, from a configuration of magnets and coils arranged in a particular order. Unlike ordinary generators, which required motion, combustion, or external input, Kohler's device was said to run continuously once started. The first descriptions of the machine emerged in the 1920s and 1930s, when Kohler presented his work to small groups of associates. By his own account, the device used carefully aligned permanent magnets and metallic plates. When the arrangement was correct, he claimed, the system produced energy in excess of what had been put into it. To Kohler, it was evidence of a previously unknown principle of physics, a way of tapping into the natural forces of the universe through magnetism. The true intrigue came during the Second World War. Reports suggest that the German Navy took an interest in Kohler's work, investigating whether the apparatus could be adapted for military purposes. According to documents later uncovered by Allied intelligence, Kohler was interviewed and his device was studied under supervision. The possibility of a compact, fuel-free power source was of obvious strategic value, especially during a war where resources were scarce. When the war ended, Allied forces gathered vast amounts of scientific material from Germany, including records of advanced or experimental technologies. Among these were reports describing Kohler's device. In 1946, British intelligence compiled a document titled The Invention of Hans Kohler, relating to an alleged new source of power. It outlined what was known of the machine, its supposed operating principles, and the results of investigations carried out in Germany. According to the report, Kohler had built two main types of apparatus. The first was a small-scale experimental unit that produced modest electrical output. The second was a larger version, known as the Magnetstrom apparatus, which allegedly delivered several kilowatts of continuous power. Despite these detailed accounts, the apparatus never reappeared in functional form. British scientists attempted to reproduce Kohler's device based on the available information but could not obtain the reported results. Some suggested that Kohler himself may have been mistaken, that his measurements were flawed, or that the device functioned only under special conditions not understood by observers. Others suspected exaggeration, or even deliberate deception, though no clear motive was ever established. The absence of a working model left the story unresolved. If Kohler truly discovered a new principle of energy production, it was lost in the confusion of war and its aftermath. If the device never worked as described, it remains an example of how easily human imagination and hope can attach themselves to the possibility of limitless power. In later decades, the Kohler magnetic current apparatus became part of the broader tradition of forbidden inventions. It was cited in books and articles about suppressed energy technologies, often alongside the works of Nikola Tesla and other pioneers whose more unusual experiments were left unexplored. To many, Kohler's story symbolized the idea that knowledge had been hidden, whether through secrecy, neglect, or deliberate suppression. What makes the case compelling is not only the claim itself, but the fact that it was investigated at the highest levels of intelligence after the war. The British documents remain available, offering a rare glimpse into how seriously such claims were once considered. They describe test setups, schematics, and observations, but they also admit failure in reproducing the effect. The contradiction between the detailed reporting and the lack of results leaves a shadow of mystery that has never fully lifted. Today, no verified working example of the Kohler device exists. It is remembered only through descriptions, intelligence files, and the echoes of demonstrations that may or may not have been genuine. Whether it was an error, a deception, or a discovery erased by history, the Kohler magnetic current apparatus remains one of the most curious inventions ever linked to the hidden science of the 20th century. In the quiet of historical memory, it stands as another reminder of how close humanity sometimes believes it has come to unlocking an endless source of energy, only to have the vision dissolve into doubt, leaving behind little more than a story. The Vril Generator. In the late 19th century, a peculiar word entered the imagination of Europe: Vril. It appeared first in a novel published in 1871 by Edward Bulwer Lytton, titled The Coming Race. The book described a subterranean civilization of advanced beings who harnessed an energy force called Vril. This power was said to flow through all life and matter, capable of healing, destruction, or transformation depending on the will of its wielder. Bulwer Lytton presented the idea as fiction, but it carried such a sense of possibility that many readers began to wonder if Vril might be real. As the decades passed, the concept of Vril became woven into occult societies, mystical orders, and speculative scientific circles. To some, it represented a hidden energy source, an ancient knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. In Germany, particularly during the early 20th century, the word gained special resonance. There, a number of esoteric groups and secret societies adopted the idea, blending it with theories of magnetism, electricity, and cosmic forces. Among them were those who claimed that devices had been built to channel Vril itself. The so-called Vril Generator occupies a place in this shadowy history. It was not an invention in the conventional sense with patents, prototypes, and laboratory notes. Instead, it lived through scattered reports, testimonies, and post-war rumors that suggested experiments were carried out to create a machine that could tap into this mysterious power. The idea was that Vril, like electricity or magnetism, was a natural force, unseen, but accessible through the correct configuration of coils, magnets, and resonant circuits. During the years leading up to the Second World War, accounts began to circulate of German engineers and mystics working together on such devices. Some claimed that a society known as the Vrilgesellschaft or Vril Society was directly involved. According to these stories, the society believed that humanity had once known how to harness Vril and that modern technology could revive the lost art. The Vril Generator was described as a machine that converted this universal energy into usable power, perhaps even into propulsion for aircraft or ships. The details varied, but common themes appeared. The device often involved rotating magnetic fields, resonant frequencies, and arrangements of coils resembling those used in experimental electrical engineering of the time. In some accounts, it was said to produce a luminous glow, as though drawing on a source beyond ordinary electricity. Others suggested it could create lift, reducing weight, or even allowing flight without fuel. The line between science and myth blurred, and the more the story spread, the less certain its foundation became. What is known with more certainty is that Allied intelligence after the war collected documents and testimonies related to unusual German projects. While most of the advanced work centered on rocketry and jet propulsion, there were also scattered references to energy experiments that did not fit into conventional categories. Some of these were dismissed as misunderstandings, while others were classified and left unresolved. It is within this uncertain space that the legend of the Vril Generator continued to grow. Historians and researchers who studied the subject in later decades often concluded that the Vril Generator was more myth than reality. No working model was ever produced, and no detailed technical description survived. What gave the story persistence was the cultural impact of the word Vril itself. It symbolized the dream of limitless energy, the possibility of unlocking a power source that lay beyond fuel, beyond combustion, beyond the limits of known physics. In a century marked by industrial hunger and war, such an idea carried enormous weight. For some, the Vril Generator became a metaphor for lost knowledge, a symbol of how close humanity might have come to discovering a new force of nature, only to see it vanish into obscurity. For others, it stood as a cautionary tale of how easily myth and speculation can cloak themselves in the language of science, blurring the boundary between imagination and reality. Today, the Vril Generator remains part of the catalog of forbidden inventions, machines that may never have existed, yet continue to capture attention because of what they represent. Whether it was ever truly built or only imagined, it reflects the human tendency to believe in hidden sources of power, forces waiting in the background of nature to be uncovered. The story endures not because of engineering blueprints or laboratory tests, but because it inhabits the borderland where science meets myth. In that space, the Vril Generator continues to hum quietly in historical memory, a reminder of the energies humanity once dreamed of harnessing, and the mysteries that remain just beyond reach. The Tesla Oscillator Pocket Earthquake Machine. At the turn of the 20th century, Nikola Tesla stood at the center of scientific curiosity and public fascination. His name was already linked to alternating current, wireless transmission, and a vision of boundless energy. Yet among his many creations and experiments, one invention occupies a particularly strange place in his legend: the Tesla Oscillator, often called the Pocket Earthquake Machine. It was a small mechanical device, but one that Tesla claimed could unleash vibrations powerful enough to shake buildings and, under certain conditions, mimic the force of an earthquake. The device was based on the principle of mechanical resonance. Resonance occurs when an object vibrates at a frequency that matches its natural frequency, amplifying the motion dramatically. Tesla understood that this principle, well known in physics, could have profound applications if properly harnessed. In his view, even a small device could generate immense effects if tuned precisely to the resonant frequency of the object it was attached to. Tesla's oscillator was not large or imposing. By some descriptions, it could fit into a hand, a compact mechanism of pistons, valves, and oscillating parts powered by steam or compressed air. Its purpose was simple: to create rhythmic vibrations at a controlled frequency. In demonstrations, Tesla attached the device to beams, platforms, or pieces of machinery, showing how its steady pulses caused objects to shake with surprising intensity. The effect was not the result of great power, but of synchronization. As the vibrations built up, the object itself contributed to the motion, amplifying the impact far beyond the strength of the small machine. The story that gave the device its dramatic reputation took place in 1898 at Tesla's laboratory in New York. According to later accounts, Tesla attached the oscillator to a steel beam as part of an experiment. At first, the beam vibrated gently, but as the minutes passed, the vibrations intensified. Soon, the entire structure began to tremble. Workers outside reportedly noticed the building shaking and assumed an earthquake was occurring. Alarm spread, and Tesla himself, realizing the potential danger, hurried to stop the device by smashing it with a hammer. The story became part of his legend. A machine so small it could be carried in one hand, yet powerful enough to endanger an entire building. Tesla later spoke openly about the oscillator's potential. He suggested that if a device were tuned to the natural frequency of the Earth itself, it might produce seismic effects on a planetary scale. He claimed to have conducted experiments that demonstrated this possibility, though no definitive evidence was ever provided. To Tesla, the oscillator was proof of the immense power hidden in resonance, a principle that could revolutionize engineering, energy transmission, and even planetary science. The scientific community remained skeptical. While resonance was well understood, the claim that a small oscillator could bring down large structures or influence geological forces was considered unlikely. Engineers argued that while resonance could certainly amplify vibrations, practical limitations such as energy loss and material damping made Tesla's more dramatic claims unrealistic. The absence of documented demonstrations beyond his own accounts only deepened the doubts. Yet the legend persisted. Newspapers of the era, eager for sensational stories, repeated and embellished Tesla's claims. The image of a handheld device capable of producing earthquakes captured the imagination of the public. It became one more example of Tesla's reputation as both a scientific visionary and a figure surrounded by mystery. Some saw him as a prophet of future technologies, while others considered him a dreamer whose ideas sometimes strayed beyond practical limits. In later decades, the Tesla oscillator was remembered less as an engineering prototype and more as a forbidden invention, something both possible and impossible at once. It represented the allure of hidden power, the notion that a simple device could unlock forces usually associated with nature itself. In this way, it joined the catalog of inventions that seemed too dangerous or too disruptive to be fully developed, consigned instead to legend and speculation. Today, modern engineering recognizes the real effects of resonance. Bridges, towers, and machinery are carefully designed to avoid destructive oscillations. Earthquakes demonstrate the natural version of what Tesla described, as buildings and structures collapse when shaken at frequencies close to their natural modes. In this sense, Tesla's insight was accurate. Resonance can indeed unleash immense power. But whether his compact oscillator truly achieved the dramatic effects he claimed remains uncertain. The pocket earthquake machine survives in memory not through technical blueprints or working models, but through stories passed down from Tesla himself and those who reported on his experiments. It embodies the strange blend of fact and legend that defines so much of Tesla's legacy, an idea balanced between physics and myth, possibility and exaggeration. Whether real or exaggerated, the Tesla oscillator remains an evocative symbol of how small inventions can suggest vast potential. In the quiet of history, it is remembered as a device that might have shaken the earth itself, a whisper of resonance that still echoes in the imagination. The Ether Ship of Charles Dellschau. In the quiet corners of American history, few figures are as unusual as Charles August Albert Dellschau. Born in 1830 in Prussia and emigrating to the United States as a young man, he lived most of his life in relative obscurity. He worked as a butcher in Houston, Texas, and outwardly left little mark on the world. Yet in his later years, Dellschau began producing a vast collection of illustrated manuscripts that would not be discovered until after his death. Within them lay strange drawings and cryptic accounts of flying machines he called aeros, powered by a mysterious substance he named NB gas. Among these imagined crafts was something he referred to as the Ether Ship. The story begins around 1899, when Dellschau, then in his late 60s, retired from work and devoted himself to art and writing. Over the next 2 decades, he created a series of notebooks filled with elaborate watercolors, collages, and texts. They depicted fantastic aircraft, often resembling hybrid forms of balloons, airships, and mechanical contraptions. Each was carefully labeled, numbered, and annotated with descriptions written in Dellschau's unique coded language. The drawings seemed to belong to a world of invention, a private archive of a technology that might have existed but had never been made public. At the center of these works was the idea of the Ether Ship, a craft capable of traveling not only through the air but, as some of his notes suggested, through the very medium of the ether itself. In the late 19th century, the ether was believed by many scientists to be a subtle substance filling the universe, the carrier of light waves and electromagnetic forces. Though later disproven by physics, the ether concept inspired countless speculations. Dellschau appeared to embrace it fully, imagining ships that could float upon or even draw power from this invisible medium. His accounts referred to a secret group called the Sonora Aero Club, supposedly based in California in the mid-19th century. According to Dellschau's writings, this group experimented with advanced flying machines decades before the Wright brothers' first powered flight. Their technology, he claimed, relied on NB gas, a mysterious fuel that allowed the aeros to overcome gravity. The Ether Ship was presented as one of the most advanced of these designs, capable of long-distance travel and extraordinary feats of navigation. When Dellschau died in 1923, his manuscripts were stored away and nearly lost. Decades later, in the 1960s, they were rediscovered in a Houston junkyard, where they had been discarded after a house fire. An art dealer recognized their uniqueness and preserved them. From that point, Dellschau's work began to attract attention, not only from art historians but also from researchers of aviation history, occult traditions, and alternative science. The manuscripts, now preserved in museums and private collections, are striking for their detail and consistency. Page after page shows elaborate renderings of aeros, each with technical notes and cryptic annotations. The Ether Ship, in particular, appears in several variations, suggesting a recurring idea within Dellschau's imagined technology. Its appearance combines elements of dirigibles and fantastical machinery, with compartments, propulsion systems, and symbolic markings that hint at a purpose beyond ordinary flight. Whether Dellschau's accounts were a record of real experiments or the imaginative visions of an isolated man remains unresolved. No independent evidence of the Sonora Aero Club or its supposed technologies has ever been found. Historians generally believe Dellschau invented the club as a narrative framework for his art, blending memory, fantasy, and contemporary fascination with flight. The NB gas and the ether ship likely emerged from his imagination, shaped by the scientific discussions of his era. Yet the sheer volume and intricacy of his work leave room for speculation, encouraging some to wonder whether fragments of hidden knowledge found their way into his notebooks. The ether ship thus occupies a space between invention and myth. It embodies the hopes of an era when human flight was still a dream, when the boundaries of possibility had not yet been defined. Dellschau's vision, though unverified, reflects the longing to rise beyond the Earth, to explore the skies and perhaps the greater cosmos, using forces that science had not yet explained. Today, Dellschau is remembered as an outsider artist, one whose creations blur the line between engineering draft and visionary manuscript. The ether ship is preserved not as a working machine but as an idea committed to paper with extraordinary dedication. In this way, it has survived the passage of time, offering a glimpse into a mind that sought to imagine technologies far beyond the world of the early 20th century. In the meditative silence of his drawings, the ether ship still seems ready to rise, floating not upon air or fuel but upon the currents of imagination itself. It is a reminder of how invention and creativity can merge, producing visions that outlast both their creator and the science of their age. The magnetic monopole generator. Magnetism, as most people know it, has always been defined by pairs. Every magnet carries two poles, north and south, bound together so that no matter how small the piece becomes, the duality remains. Break a magnet in half and each fragment still possesses both poles. This symmetry was long considered unbreakable, a law of nature confirmed again and again in experiment. Yet within the world of forbidden inventions, there is the recurring story of the magnetic monopole generator, a device said to have harnessed isolated magnetic poles, using them as a source of energy unlike any known before. The theoretical basis for magnetic monopoles reaches deep into modern physics. The idea that a north pole might exist without a south, or a south without a north, was considered by great mathematicians and physicists. In the early 20th century, Paul Dirac proposed that if even a single magnetic monopole existed, it would explain the fundamental nature of electric charge in the universe. The idea was powerful, but no monopoles were ever conclusively detected. Despite that, the concept inspired inventors, visionaries, and fringe researchers who believed they had found a way to isolate or simulate monopoles in the laboratory. The magnetic monopole generator entered this strange space between theory and speculation. Accounts varied, but the essence of the machine was consistent. It was designed to exploit a one-sided magnetic field, producing energy with remarkable efficiency. By eliminating the need for the paired opposition of poles, the generator was said to achieve effects impossible in conventional electromagnetism. Proponents described devices where fields flowed in one direction only, producing currents that required no fuel, no combustion, and no depletion of resources. The earliest mentions of such a generator appeared in obscure patents and experimental notes from the mid-20th century. Some inventors claimed to create monopole-like effects through unusual arrangements of permanent magnets and coils. Others suggested that plasma discharges, rotating fields, or cryogenic conditions could bring about conditions where a magnetic pole might exist in isolation. A few claimed to have built prototypes, describing them as compact, silent machines that produced a steady flow of usable energy. Skeptics were quick to dismiss these claims. In accepted physics, no laboratory had ever confirmed the existence of true magnetic monopoles. Without evidence, most mainstream scientists regarded the supposed generators as wishful thinking or misinterpretation of experimental results. Yet the stories did not disappear. Instead, they grew stronger in circles devoted to alternative energy, where the magnetic monopole generator was seen as a breakthrough deliberately suppressed or forgotten. Some reports connected the device with military research during the Cold War. According to these accounts, experiments in high-field electromagnetism occasionally produced anomalies, magnetic signatures that did not align with established models. Whether these anomalies hinted at monopole-like effects or were simply measurement errors remains unknown. Still, rumors spread that laboratories had stumbled upon principles that could, if developed, lead to inexhaustible sources of power. The promise of the magnetic monopole generator was immense. Unlike solar or wind energy, it would not depend on weather. Unlike combustion, it would not consume material. It suggested a direct tapping of a hidden property of nature, a force as fundamental as electricity itself. For those who believed in it, the generator was more than a machine. It was a key to a new era of human progress, where energy scarcity would vanish and technological possibility would expand without limit. Yet just as quickly as these stories rose, they faded. No prototype was ever revealed publicly. No peer-reviewed paper confirmed the phenomenon. When researchers attempted to replicate the claims, they found no evidence beyond the familiar laws of magnetism. What survived instead were fragments. Patents filed and abandoned, sketches of unusual magnetic arrangements, and accounts from inventors who insisted their machines had worked until they were confiscated, dismantled, or lost. In modern times, the search for monopoles continues in particle physics, with experiments in high-energy colliders and cosmic ray detectors. These scientific efforts are rigorous, but they belong to a world far removed from the rumors of generators hidden in workshops or suppressed by authorities. The magnetic monopole generator, as it appears in the catalog of forbidden inventions, belongs to another tradition, a story of discovery that never reached confirmation, of technology that exists only in the haze between imagination and reality. It remains compelling not because of what it achieved, but because of what it suggested, that the deep symmetries of nature might not be absolute, and that a single break in the pattern could open a path to unlimited power. In that sense, the magnetic monopole generator stands as both a myth and a possibility, a reminder of how fragile the boundary can be between what is considered impossible and what might, under different circumstances, be revealed. Even now, the very thought of a machine harnessing one-sided magnetism lingers in the imagination. Whether or not such a device ever existed, it continues to occupy a place in the archive of lost technologies, a quiet symbol of the energies humanity still dreams of uncovering. The Chernetsky plasma generator. In the final decades of the Soviet Union, a quiet but determined group of scientists pursued experiments that did not always fit neatly into the established frameworks of physics. Among them was Alexander Chernetsky, an electrical engineer and researcher whose work in the 1970s and 1980s produced one of the most intriguing devices in the history of alternative energy. It became known as the Chernetsky plasma generator, a machine that some claimed could draw power directly from the vacuum of space itself. Chernetsky's background was firmly within academic science. He worked in Moscow at the State Institute for Information Transmission Problems, part of the prestigious Academy of Sciences. His official research focused on high-voltage discharges and plasma phenomena, fields that were relevant to both communications and energy technology. But Chernetsky's experiments gradually took a more unusual direction. He became convinced that electrical discharges in plasma could trigger interactions with the vacuum, releasing an additional source of energy not accounted for by conventional physics. The device he built to test this idea was relatively simple in appearance. It consisted of electrodes, capacitors, and plasma tubes arranged in a circuit designed to create strong pulsed discharges. When operated, the machine produced glowing plasma arcs, bright and unstable, like miniature lightning trapped within glass. According to Chernetsky, under certain conditions the generator output more energy than it consumed. The effect, he argued, was evidence that the machine was tapping into what he called the physical vacuum, a background field of energy that permeated space. To Chernetsky, this discovery suggested a new era of energy production. If the plasma generator could be refined and scaled, it might provide limitless power without fuel, combustion, or pollution. He described the process as a self-generating discharge, one that once initiated could sustain itself while producing usable energy. The implications were extraordinary. A source of power that defied the conventional laws of thermodynamics, offering humanity freedom from the limits of fossil fuels and reactors. Reports of his experiments circulated quietly within Soviet scientific circles. Some colleagues supported his findings, noting anomalous measurements that could not be explained by ordinary losses or errors. Others dismissed the results as misinterpretations, pointing out the difficulty of accurately measuring energy flows in plasma systems. High-voltage discharges are notoriously unpredictable, and distinguishing genuine over-unity effects from artifacts of instrumentation is a formidable challenge. Despite the skepticism, Chernetsky continued his work, refining the plasma generator through the 1980s. He claimed that his later versions operated in a stable mode, producing measurable excess energy. In some accounts, he reported that the device could maintain its output even when disconnected from the primary power source, as though it had become self-sustaining. Such claims, if verified, would have represented a fundamental breakthrough in physics. But they were never independently confirmed. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 brought disruption to many research programs, and Chernetsky's work was no exception. Funding disappeared, laboratories were abandoned, and many experimental projects were left unfinished. Chernetsky himself passed away not long afterward, and with his death the plasma generator entered the realm of speculation. Some of his notes and reports survived, but no working device was preserved. In the years since, the Chernetsky plasma generator has been remembered as one of the great lost inventions of the late Soviet period. To those interested in alternative energy, it symbolizes a breakthrough cut short by political and economic collapse. To skeptics, it remains an example of how extraordinary claims can arise from the complexities of plasma physics without ever reaching proof. The absence of replicable demonstrations means it cannot be placed within the secure body of scientific knowledge. Yet the idea refuses to fade. Plasma itself is a mysterious state of matter, rich with nonlinear effects and instabilities that often surprise researchers. The notion that it could serve as a gateway to hidden forms of energy continues to inspire inventors around the world. Many later devices described in fringe energy research bear a resemblance to Chernetsky's generator, suggesting that his work left an enduring mark on the imagination of those seeking new sources of power. The Chernetsky plasma generator occupies a liminal space. It is neither fully myth nor fully established fact. It belongs to that category of inventions that suggest immense potential, yet vanish before their claims can be solidified. In the silence left by incomplete experiments, the mind fills the gaps with possibility. Perhaps Chernetsky truly glimpsed a hidden principle of nature, or perhaps he was misled by the illusions of plasma and the limitations of measurement. What remains is the story of a Soviet scientist who, in the midst of political upheaval, pursued an idea that challenged the foundations of physics. His plasma generator, bright with arcs of energy and alive with promise, stands today as one of the most fascinating forbidden inventions, a reminder of the paths science might have taken, and of the discoveries that may still lie waiting in the uncharted depths of the physical world. The Townsend device for wireless power. In the early decades of the 20th century, Thomas Townsend Brown pursued experiments that seemed to blur the boundary between electricity, magnetism, and gravity itself. He is remembered today for his research into electrogravitics, the idea that charged capacitors could produce thrust or reduce weight. But among the many accounts of his work, there is also mention of another remarkable invention: a device for transmitting electrical power wirelessly, without the need for wires, fuel, or conventional infrastructure. Brown's interest in unusual electrical phenomena began while he was still a student in the 1920s. Working with high-voltage capacitors and vacuum tubes, he observed effects that did not seem to fit within standard theory. He noticed that certain configurations of charged objects appeared to produce directional forces, a discovery that would lead to his lifelong pursuit of gravity control. Yet in parallel, Brown also explored the transmission of energy without conductors, convinced that the same principles could be adapted for practical use. The Townsend device, as it came to be called in later accounts, was described as a system that combined resonant circuits, capacitors, and high-frequency oscillations to project usable electrical energy through space. Unlike radio, which transmits signals of very low power, Brown's machine was said to transfer actual electrical energy that could be captured at a distance and applied to motors, lights, or other devices. The idea echoed the ambitions of Nikola Tesla, who decades earlier had attempted to construct a global wireless energy network. Brown's approach, however, appeared more compact. Reports suggest that his device involved tuned oscillators that produced fields capable of coupling with distant receivers. In demonstrations, witnesses described bulbs lighting without wires, motors running while disconnected from conventional circuits, and energy leaping invisibly across space. To those who saw it, the Townsend device was a glimpse of a future where electricity flowed as freely as radio waves, powering machines without infrastructure. The scientific establishment remained cautious. Wireless transmission of power was not impossible. Radio itself had proven that energy could be carried through space, but the efficiency required for practical applications was another matter. Transmitting useful amounts of power without massive losses was considered unattainable with known technology. Brown's claims, like Tesla's before him, seemed to belong more to visionary speculation than to demonstrated engineering. Nevertheless, the device attracted attention from the military and from private companies during the mid-20th century. Brown's reputation as an inventor working at the edges of physics gave weight to his demonstrations, even if the underlying theory remained unclear. Some accounts suggest that classified research into his methods continued, though the details were never released to the public. What is certain is that no commercial system ever emerged from his efforts, and no verified working model of the Townsend device survives today. The idea of wireless power, however, did not vanish. In modern times, small-scale versions exist in the form of inductive charging pads for phones and electric toothbrushes, or experimental systems for powering vehicles wirelessly over short distances. These rely on principles of resonant inductive coupling, an approach not so different from what Brown may have envisioned. Yet the bold claim that electricity could be sent freely through the air over great distances, efficiently and reliably, remains unrealized. The Townsend device thus occupies a curious place in the history of invention. It is part of a lineage that stretches from Tesla to present-day wireless technologies, but it remains distinct in its aura of mystery. Without schematics, prototypes, or reproducible demonstrations, it cannot be placed within the framework of accepted science. Instead, it joins the catalog of forbidden inventions, machines that are remembered more through testimony and rumor than through material proof. What gives the story weight is not only the machine itself, but the vision it represented. The dream of unlimited, wireless energy speaks to a universal human desire to be freed from cables, grids, and dependence on scarce resources. Brown's device, whether real or imagined, suggested that such a future might be possible. That suggestion alone was enough to ensure its survival in the realm of legend. Today, when we speak of the Townsend device for wireless power, we speak not only of an unproven machine but of a symbol. It represents the possibility that somewhere in the forgotten experiments of the past, humanity may already have glimpsed the key to a different kind of world, one where energy moves invisibly, silently, and without limit. The Dean drive, reactionless drive. In the 1950s and 1960s, a quiet yet persistent rumor spread across the American scientific and engineering community. At its center was an inventor named Norman L. Dean, a man who claimed to have created a machine that could defy one of the most fundamental laws of physics. His device was called the Dean drive, and it was said to be a reactionless drive, a propulsion system that could move forward without ejecting fuel or pushing against air, water, or any external medium. The principle seemed impossible. According to Newton's third law, every action must have an equal and opposite reaction. A rocket flies because it expels gas backward, and an airplane flies because its wings push air downward. Motion without reaction, in the physics we know, is not permitted. Yet Dean insisted he had found a way around this limitation, and for a brief time, his machine fascinated journalists, engineers, and even the United States government. Dean was a former patent office employee, not a formally trained physicist, but he had a reputation for mechanical ingenuity. He constructed a series of small, box-shaped devices filled with rotating masses and vibrating mechanisms. When switched on, these machines appeared to lurch forward, dragging themselves across tables or pulling against their mounts with a strange, uneven force. To observers, it seemed as if the box were gripping space itself, converting internal motion into linear thrust. The promise was extraordinary. If the Dean drive worked as claimed, it would revolutionize transportation and space exploration. Rockets would no longer need to carry vast amounts of propellant. A spacecraft equipped with a reactionless drive could accelerate indefinitely, reaching the outer planets or even the stars without fuel limitations. On Earth, such a device could move vehicles silently and without exhaust, bypassing the constraints of engines, turbines, and combustion. It was the dream of a new age of motion. Dean, however, was secretive. He never revealed full details of the drive's construction, claiming he wished to secure patents and prevent others from exploiting his invention. This secrecy only heightened curiosity, but it also meant his device was never subjected to the kind of rigorous, independent testing that might have confirmed or refuted his claims. Demonstrations to journalists showed the box sliding across a surface, but skeptics argued that the effect was an illusion, caused by friction and vibration. The machine, they said, was not defying physics. It was simply walking across the table. Still, interest persisted. In the early 1960s, articles about the Dean drive appeared in science magazines, capturing the imagination of readers who longed for breakthroughs in space travel. The U.S. Air Force and Navy reportedly examined the device, curious about its potential military applications. But in each case, investigations ended without confirmation of a real effect. Dean himself never succeeded in convincing the scientific community, and no reliable data were published. The story took on a life of its own. Some believe Dean had truly discovered a new principle of propulsion, but that his work was suppressed by governments who feared its destabilizing potential. Others saw him as a well-meaning tinkerer whose enthusiasm led him to misinterpret his results. A smaller group dismissed the Dean drive as little more than pseudoscience, a distraction from serious research. Yet the persistence of the idea, the notion of motion without reaction, proved difficult to erase. The legacy of the Dean drive is not limited to engineering circles. It entered the realm of science fiction, inspiring writers who imagined starships equipped with mysterious inertial drives that could travel faster, farther, and freer than rockets. In popular culture, the concept of reactionless propulsion became shorthand for ultimate technological liberation, a metaphor for transcending limits that bind us to Earth. Dean's box, whether real or not, served as a symbol of that longing. Even today, discussions of the Dean drive surface among enthusiasts of fringe physics and alternative propulsion. Some modern researchers experiment with devices that appear similar, using oscillating masses or gyroscopes to generate thrust. None have demonstrated results beyond the explanations of known mechanics, but the fascination remains. The dream of a machine that can push against nothing yet move forward continues to capture the imagination of those who believe our understanding of physics may not be complete. Looking back, the Dean drive occupies a peculiar position in history. It is not remembered as a proven invention, nor is it dismissed entirely as a hoax. Instead, it lives in the gray zone of what if, a story about a man who dared to claim that the most unbreakable of laws could be broken. Whether Norman Dean deceived himself or glimpsed something extraordinary that the world was not ready to accept remains an open question. What endures is the image of a small box on a workshop table, humming and shuddering, as though straining to reveal a secret hidden deep within the fabric of motion itself. The Dean drive remains one of the most compelling forbidden inventions, a reminder of humanity's restless desire to slip beyond the limits of the possible, and to travel into realms where even the laws of physics may one day be rewritten. The Starlite Material. In the 1980s and 1990s, a soft-spoken British amateur inventor named Maurice Ward startled the world with claims that seemed to border on the impossible. He was not a scientist by training, nor did he have the resources of a laboratory or university behind him. He was, instead, a hairdresser by trade, a man who mixed chemicals in his spare time, tinkering with substances in pursuit of new ideas. Out of this unlikely background emerged a material that came to be known as starlite, a substance said to withstand levels of heat and radiation that would destroy almost anything else on Earth. The story began in Ward's small workshop in the north of England. Using ingredients he never fully disclosed, he concocted a material that looked deceptively ordinary, light in weight, moldable, resembling a plastic or resin. But its properties, if reports are to be believed, were extraordinary. In demonstrations, Ward would apply a direct flame from a blowtorch to a sample of starlite. The flame roared against its surface, hot enough to melt steel. Yet when the torch was removed, the other side of the material was cool to the touch. Word of this strange invention spread quickly. In 1990, the BBC program Tomorrow's World featured Starlite in a televised demonstration. A raw egg, coated with the material, was held in a flame for several minutes. Viewers watched in disbelief as the egg remained intact, uncooked, while the shell beneath the protective layer showed no sign of burning. It seemed as though Ward had discovered a heat shield beyond anything science had yet achieved. The implications were profound. If Starlite was real, it could transform industries. Spacecraft re-entering Earth's atmosphere could be coated with the substance, eliminating the risk of burning up. Aircraft, nuclear facilities, and even buildings could be made vastly safer. Firefighters could wear gear that allowed them to walk through flames unharmed. Military and industrial uses were endless. In an age still haunted by disasters like the Challenger explosion and the threat of nuclear accidents, a material that resisted extreme heat and radiation was nothing short of revolutionary. Scientific interest soon followed. Tests conducted under controlled conditions appeared to confirm at least some of Ward's claims. At the Royal Signals and Radar Establishment, samples of Starlite were subjected to intense bursts of energy similar to those found in nuclear explosions. To the astonishment of observers, the material withstood pressures and temperatures that would normally vaporize most substances. NASA expressed interest, as did the UK's Ministry of Defence. For a brief moment, it seemed that Ward's discovery might alter the course of technology. And yet, Starlite never entered production. Despite the excitement, Ward remained fiercely protective of his creation. He refused to reveal its composition, fearing exploitation by corporations or governments. Negotiations with potential partners often stalled, as he insisted on retaining strict control over the material. Some speculated that his caution was justified, that such a breakthrough in the wrong hands could be weaponized or monopolized. Others suggested that his secrecy prevented the scientific validation necessary to bring Starlite into the world. As years passed, skepticism grew. Without access to independent samples or peer-reviewed research, critics argued that the claims surrounding Starlite could not be verified. Some accused Ward of exaggeration, or even of creating an elaborate hoax. Supporters countered that too many credible demonstrations had been witnessed for the invention to be dismissed outright. The truth remained elusive, hidden behind the inventor's refusal to share his formula. Maurice Ward died in 2011, taking the secret of Starlite with him. His family has occasionally suggested that he left behind notes or samples, but nothing has ever been released publicly. What remains are videos of demonstrations, fragments of testimony from scientists and journalists, and the enduring mystery of whether Starlite was as miraculous as it appeared. The story of Starlite is haunting in its ambiguity. It embodies the tension between individual genius and institutional science, between discovery and secrecy. If Ward's material was genuine, it may represent one of the greatest lost opportunities of modern times. A substance that could have saved lives, protected environments, and advanced technology by decades. If it was exaggerated, then it stands as a cautionary tale about the power of illusion and the need for verification. Either way, Starlite occupies a special place among the catalog of forbidden inventions. It is not a grand machine, nor a complex system of wires and magnets. It is instead a simple material, lightweight, unassuming, and ordinary to the eye, that might have hidden within it the ability to withstand the very forces of stars. Whether miracle or myth, it remains a story of potential glimpsed but never fully realized, a reminder of how fragile the path of discovery can be when guarded too closely by human hands. The ancient Greek fire. Among the technologies of antiquity, few have proved as lasting in myth as the weapon the Byzantines called Greek fire. It arrived in recorded history as a terrifying instrument of war, a substance that burned upon water, clung to timbers, and resisted ordinary means of extinguishment. For centuries it remained a closely guarded secret of the Byzantine state, a technology that changed naval warfare and then slipped from view, its true composition lost in the fog of time. The first clear historical accounts of Greek fire appear in the 7th century, during a perilous era for the Byzantine Empire. Faced with seaborne threats that could overrun its ports and cities, Byzantium required an edge. According to contemporary chronicles, The state deployed a new weapon that could be projected from pressurized siphons mounted on ships and towers. In battle, it made the sea itself a danger. Enemy vessels struck by the flaming substance could not simply douse the flames with water, and entire fleets were routed by the sudden appearance of a flame that consumed rope, wood, and crew with merciless efficiency. The practical details survivors left behind were restrained by secrecy and the passage of centuries. The recorded descriptions emphasize its effects rather than its chemistry. Greek fire burned fiercely, adhered to surfaces, and resisted smothering. It could be sprayed as a jet, poured as a liquid, or delivered in jars that shattered on impact. Contemporary chroniclers, soldiers, sailors, and court historians marveled at its destructive power. Byzantine engineers and military officials guarded its manufacture closely. The formula was reputedly known to only a few trusted practitioners and handed down within imperial workshops. Modern historians and chemists have proposed many candidate recipes to explain Greek fire's exceptional behavior. Reconstructions commonly include combustible hydrocarbons, such as crude oil or pitch, combined with resinous materials to increase viscosity and adhesion. Lime or quicklime has been suggested as a component that could intensify heat when combined with water, while sulfur and other additives could alter burning characteristics. Many reconstructions propose a delivery system based on hand-operated pumps, bellows, and pressurized containers, technology entirely plausible for late antiquity when mechanical ingenuity was high. What set Greek fire apart in historical accounts was not only its ingredients but the doctrine of its production and use. The Byzantines created specialized workshops, fabrici, where artisans, engineers, and chemists worked to refine the weapon. These workshops were state-controlled, producing not only the substance but also the pumps, siphons, and containment devices needed to project it effectively. Military manuals and iconography show detailed procedures for mounting and operating the apparatus. The weapons manufacture was an institutional competence, embedded in the logistics of empire. The secrecy surrounding the formula had strategic reasons. If the composition were general knowledge, adversaries might replicate it or develop countermeasures. By keeping production tightly controlled, Byzantium preserved a tactical monopoly that, for generations, helped defend Constantinople and its maritime interests. Yet the same secrecy contributed to the weapon's disappearance. When the political and material infrastructures that supported Greek fire decayed, during sieges, economic decline, or the loss of specialized artisans, the knowledge of its precise composition and production was not reliably transmitted. Unlike simple recipes recorded in many cultures, Greek fire's manufacture was an artisanal craft tied to specific people, tools, and supply lines. Over time, numerous attempts were made to reverse engineer the substance from descriptions and the archaeological record. Scholars examined amphorae, shipwreck residues, and medieval texts for chemical traces. Some analyses detected long-chain hydrocarbons consistent with pitch or petroleum-based materials in residues from certain Byzantine sites. Others emphasized how the addition of adhesion agents, emulsifiers, and oxidizers could account for the persistent flames. Still, no single reconstruction has achieved universal acceptance. The evidence is fragmentary, the sources are sometimes contradictory, and the practical details, exact proportions, temperatures of processing, and the method of pressurization remain uncertain. The long shadow of Greek fire persisted in military thought. Later weapons and incendiary mixtures echoed its purpose: to deny an enemy the use of ships and fortifications. Recipe books from different traditions preserved formulas for incendiaries that employed similar classes of materials: oils, resins, sulfur, and quicklime, suggesting that the core concept migrated even after the original Byzantine formula faded. In some regions, local improvisations produced mixtures with comparable effects on wooden hulls and thatch. The surviving lineage of such technologies shows that the basic idea, combining viscous, sticky fuels with agents that increase thermal damage, remained accessible to later engineers even if the original Byzantine secret vanished. Beyond its mechanical and chemical aspects, the story of Greek fire is a reminder of how technological knowledge can be both powerful and fragile. The weapon's efficacy relied on a network: the skilled craftspeople who mixed and handled the substance, the infrastructure that supplied raw materials such as pitch and lime, and the political will to maintain secrecy. When any link in that chain was broken by war, economic crisis, or social disruption, the manufacturer of the weapon could fail to survive transmission. Today, Greek fire is studied not merely as an object of curiosity, but as a case study in lost technology. It sits at the intersection of chemistry, military engineering, and institutional history. Reconstructions and experiments teach modern researchers about the possibilities and limits of pre-modern materials science. But the exact recipe, the imperial apprenticeship that perfected it, and the precise engineering of its projection systems remain partially erased, known only through scattered notes and the ash of history. In that way, Greek fire belongs with the other forbidden inventions, a practical technology so effective and so carefully protected that, when the human chain of craftsmanship was broken, it left behind only accounts of its terror and a handful of tantalizing chemical traces. The flame that once licked across the waves of the eastern Mediterranean has long since died, but the question of what exactly burned, and how it was made to burn on water, remains a lasting ember in the study of vanished technologies. The Chrono mirror of Father Pellegrino Ernetti. In the 1960s, a peculiar story began to circulate in Italy. At its center was Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk who combined religious devotion with an unusual interest in science. Ernetti was not an ordinary clergyman. He studied physics, acoustics, and music, fields that demanded careful attention to the properties of sound and vibration. Out of this unusual blend of theology and science came a claim that seemed to belong more to legend than to the laboratory. Ernetti announced that he had helped to build a machine capable of seeing into the past. He called it the Chrono mirror, though it is also remembered as the chronovisor. According to accounts attributed to Ernetti, the device was constructed in collaboration with a group of scientists and researchers. Among them, he claimed, were figures of considerable stature, including Nobel Prize-winning physicist Enrico Fermi and rocket engineer Wernher von Braun. The Chrono mirror was described as a system of antennas, sensors, and screens designed to capture vibrations from the past. Ernetti suggested that every event in history left behind a kind of residue in the form of electromagnetic and acoustic waves. By tuning the device to these lingering echoes, he believed one could reconstruct sights and sounds long vanished from the present. Descriptions of the machine vary, but they share a common theme. It was said to function like a television tuned not to a broadcast channel, but to history itself. Ernetti claimed to have witnessed scenes from the lives of ancient figures, including speeches of Cicero and theatrical performances from the Roman Empire. Most famously, he asserted that the Chrono mirror allowed him to see the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. A photograph allegedly produced by the device showed a figure on the cross, though critics later suggested it was merely a reproduction of an existing artwork. The scientific basis for such a machine is deeply problematic. Physics as we know it does not support the idea that past events persist as retrievable vibrations, available to be decoded like radio signals. Sound waves dissipate, light scatters, and the information carried by them is lost to entropy. Yet Ernetti insisted that the universe preserved these traces, and that with sufficient skill they could be recovered. He maintained his claims until his death in 1994, never retracting them despite skepticism from both scientists and clergy. What makes the Chrono mirror story particularly compelling is its mixture of credibility and mystery. Ernetti was a respected scholar in music and acoustics, with a serious academic background. He was not a figure normally associated with hoaxes or wild fabrications. The involvement of names like Fermi and von Braun, whether accurate or not, lent an aura of seriousness to the account. At the same time, the absence of tangible evidence, a surviving machine, reproducible results, or technical specifications, ensured that the Chrono mirror remained in the realm of rumor. For some, the story reflects a symbolic longing rather than a technological reality. The idea of a machine that can peer into the past speaks to humanity's deep desire to witness history firsthand, to recover moments that shaped civilizations and lives. It also resonates with theological themes, linking the human wish to see sacred events with the authority of science. In this way, the Chrono mirror is as much a cultural artifact as a scientific claim, a narrative that bridges faith, technology, and imagination. After Ernetti's death, his accounts continued to circulate, occasionally resurfacing in books, documentaries, and speculative discussions. The photograph of the crucifixion, often criticized and dismissed, remains the most visible relic of the tale. Some believe that Ernetti may have been pressured by the Church to conceal or downplay his findings. Others argue that he exaggerated the capabilities of his research, or perhaps created an allegory that later hardened into literal belief. The truth remains elusive. There is no verifiable evidence that the chrono mirror ever existed, and no independent demonstration of its function was ever offered. Yet the story persists because it touches something primal: the wish to overcome time itself. In the catalog of forbidden inventions, the chrono mirror stands apart from engines and generators. It was not meant to harness energy or conquer gravity, but to unlock the greatest mystery of all, the irretrievability of the past. Whether Father Ernetti's machine was an invention, a vision, or a myth, its legacy endures. It reminds us of the fragile boundary between science and imagination, between what is possible and what we long to be possible. In the quiet halls of a Venetian monastery, a monk once suggested that with wires and screens, we might bridge the centuries. That suggestion was enough to ensure that the chrono mirror remains, even now, one of history's most haunting lost technologies. Ending. And so, our journey through these forbidden inventions comes to a close. From strange engines and mysterious materials, to lost flames and mirrors of time, each story reminds us how fragile the line is between what is remembered and what is forgotten. These inventions may have vanished into history, but the questions they leave behind still linger in the quiet corners of our imagination. If you enjoyed this exploration, I invite you to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me which of these inventions fascinated you the most, or if you know of others that deserve a place in our next journey. Sharing this video with friends will help more people discover these hidden stories. Thank you for joining me tonight. I wish you peace, good rest, and the sweetest of dreams. Until next time, sleep well.